Okay, so this will either be a prequel or an addendum to the other talk about my experience of the Fool in my own work. But I wanted to give a little bit more philosophical background. I've started a practice where I choose from the 22 major Arcana cards each season. So every 3 months, I choose a new card, and I just, my approach is more to receive than it is to impose. That just works better for me. So I have a couple of sources that I use to clarify a picture about this archetype and whatever archetype I'm focusing on. And then I kind of dip into that throughout the season and have different images of the card or the archetype around, or notice images when they come into my world. And it's just to put a particular lens on my way of moving through the world, so I have more of an awareness when that quality comes through. So for a long time, I would have to say my favorite source for information specifically on the major arcana is a book called Meditations on the Tarot by a now identified author, Valentin Tomlin, who I don't want to get into his biography. I actually have something on my website about his origins. He was born in Russia, and I think then moved somewhere else, turn of the century, maybe a little bit after. I'm not sure about the timeline, doesn't matter. So anyway, Meditations on the Tarot, a journey into Christian Hermeticism. So this was fascinating to me because I have deeply explored Eastern philosophy and different spiritualities from around the world. I was raised Catholic, middling Catholic is how I describe it. You know, go to church on Sunday and wait for the donuts afterwards, and then, you know, it was kind of like obligatory, and then went to CCD school. So anyway, short story is that I, a number of years ago, started to feel as though it was my duty to fill in my background, my spiritual repertoire, my spiritual library, with Western sources, because I had sourced so much from Eastern sources, and there are distinct cultural differences that how those are bridged, you know, sometimes skillfully, sometimes not. So I wanted to find Western sources, and that actually led me, again, long story short, to the tarot. And it was difficult at first for me to find sources that I was really excited about. This source is extraordinarily articulate. He makes reference to an amazing number of thinkers, mystical thinkers, philosophers, artists. It's also very, very, very dense. So what I've tried to do is, this is probably part of the reason why I only do one Arcanum per season, because it almost takes me that long to get through one of Tomlin's chapters. It's just very dense and very rich. So what I've done is I've taken out the pith of those ideas, and I'm hoping to be able to articulate them here so that you can make your own connections and, you know, do what you will with it. So let's see. So again, I'm going to read from my notes just to remember what it is that I found most important. So the Fool is the Arcanum of the man as intermediary between the divine and human worlds, the man at 0 point between two fields of gravitation, terrestrial and celestial. So love that. You know, if you don't, by the way, if you don't know what the Fool card I'm referring to is, just if you type in tarot, the Fool on Google search, you'll find it. Essentially, the image is of the person, kind of androgynous, in motley, very carefree expression, and just about to heading in a skipping manner off towards the edge of a cliff. and there's a little dog or animal of some sort, usually biting at his heels, and he has a small sack over his one shoulder, and then in the other hand, usually traditionally, there's a white flower. So the ideas here, I'm not going to go into the more traditional meanings, you can find those other places, but here's that idea. I love this idea of like in the Eastern tradition, this idea of heaven, earth, and man. Man is the vertical, the point in between. So this card, according to Tomalin's thinking, is the symbol of that in-betweenness, and how it's a teaching, the Arcanum, which is of course referring to this secret, a key to unlock one of the mysteries, is this teaching is based on that idea of how man or a human might inhabit that 0 point in between heaven and earth and be a bridge or a connecting point. So in terms of the application to inner life, the individual soul begins with the experience of separation, the opposition of spiritual and intellectual elements within it, and then advances or surrenders to parallelism, a peaceful coexistence of these two elements within it. So that was a direct quote from the book. So again, talking about my experience is a very divided one. That's part of the thing that I'm always grappling with in my art, and I find it fascinating. My intellect, whatever, all the many names for rational thinking, for the language, and it's not so evenly divided between the halves, the hemispheres of the brain as once was thought, but for our purposes here, I'm just dealing with the fact that I have two very distinct experiences in life. It seems like I can switch channels from kind of definitely wordless. If you interrupt me when I'm trying to paint, it's often a grumpy me, because switching back into language is a painful thing usually, unless I'm on some superficial level of thinking. So, he's talking about or referring to this idea that the Fool is the embodiment of finding unity within those two polarities, the heaven or the celestial, again, just another way of dividing these two experiences up, in the terrestrial. Polarities are problematic, but we're just playing with ideas here. So when you unite those, he says, in its fusion, a third element comes into being, which is what he calls the philosopher's stone, because this is, again, Western language, Hermeticism. The esoteric name for the Fool is love. And I love this because, as you will see if you've already, when you listen to the other part of the video, what I discovered was an experience of love in my art making, or how to begin to uncover that experience of love when you're able to touch into this state of foolish abandon, we'll call it. So the esoteric name for the Fool is amour, love. So doubt, he says, is the soul's sojourn into the intermediary sphere between the two fields of attraction, terrestrial and celestial. So I asked myself, can this be related to the struggle between the two minds in the creative process? Reason, precision, and control, and chaos, expression, and abandonment of control. So that tension, I think, between those two things, and the marriage, when those two things can actually meet and coexist, that is kind of the wonderful pinnacle where you're able to, I'm not sure yet if it's, or I suppose there must be a unity, right, of having that experience, but for now I'm very happy when I can kind of like go back and forth between the two without too much strife. So the Fool has two poles, he says. It deals with two ways of sacrificing the intellect. One which serves as the model, something that you can look toward as a spiritual aspiration, and the other is a warning. So there's always this warning in spiritual teachings of like, if you go too far in one direction, you probably get yourself into trouble. So The model is the intellect placed in the service of transcendental consciousness. So it is what it is. When the intellect is in service, acting in service of the divine, whatever that is for you. The danger or the warning is a lack of concern, irresponsibility, ridicule, madness, intellect abandoned. So this is the meaning as I understood it as the fool in reverse. If you get the card in a reading and it's upside down, one way of reading reversed cards is that it's the inverse, or it's an extreme example, or it's a warning. So foolhardiness, right? Like going too far into devil may care, abandoning the intellect too much, subsuming the intellect in reveries. I think that's a clear enough picture of that. So the philosopher's stone, the way he describes that is human endeavor and grace unite and become a complete circle, which then concentrates to become a point where ascent and descent are simultaneous and coincide. So there's this image of the microcosmic, macrocosmic orbit, which you encounter in most traditions, but I think that terminology is a translation from Eastern, Taoistic ideas of uniting those two, uniting the heaven, uniting the earth. There you have it. In the human body, uniting the head and the heart and the sex so that you're unified, so that you're aligned. This is the fusion of prayer and meditation. The fire of prayer united with the water of the peace of meditation, marriage of the sun and moon, the calm warmth of complete certainty due to cooperation of human effort and revelation from above. Love that. The fusion of prayer and meditation. So just a simple distinction that I pulled out with the help of Tomlin here between those two. Prayer is this thanks, worships, blesses, radiates, the breath and warmth of the awakened heart expressed. So it's like, I think of Jesus and Mary, the images, the icons of Jesus and Mary, very heart-centered and radiating outward. And then meditation, again, these are simplifications, distillations. The gradual deepening of thought, to deepen, to go to the heart of things. So there's an eventual grasping of direct knowledge of eternal and immutable principles, the realization of the awakening of consciousness, the reality of the human condition. It might have been me that matched these things up, but I was thinking of that as the divine coming down. I'm still kind of parsing that out in myself, but I did really like this image of the gradual deepening of thought. Initially, I was thinking, of course, meditation, you're not supposed to think, and of course that's like the big mistake that everyone, or the big misinterpretation that most people make. You don't stop thinking. You have a different relationship with the constant river of thought that is the mind. You have a different relationship to it, which, as I was mentioning before, in terms of what you do with the intellect, is the intellect in service of the divine, or is the ego running the show, which I think is how it is for most of us, definitely me, it's just the way it is. It's not good or bad, it's just the human thing. So having attained the contemplation of things surpassing actual understanding, meditation becomes prayer. So there is a point, and again, I'm still grappling with these concepts here, definitely, about how in that microcosmic, macrocosmic orbit, meditation becomes prayer, and prayer becomes meditation. Prayer, which attains the state of contemplation without words, becomes meditation. So beautiful. The alchemical marriage of the sun and moon of the soul's inner heaven is the realization of the Arcanum, the Fool, or love, amour. The union of revelation from above with human wisdom while avoiding madness. So, residing in the center, you can't go too far into the madness. Don't go too far. Come back out of the madness every once in a while. Yeah, so anyway, I hope you enjoy this perspective on the major arcanum, and I hope I'm presenting it in a way that is relatable to creative practice and creative process. Okay, thank you.